It's election day on Politically Conscious. Today, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, our experts break down what it means to vote informed in a nation divided as Trump pledges military aid to persecuted Christians in Nigeria. Americans face a government shutdown. Is it compassion or political theater? And what would they recommend to Congress to reopen the government? If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. Episode 50 of Politically Conscious streaming live on YouTube. What's up, everybody? It's your mental activist, Montoya Smith, episode 50. We made it to 50, Emil.
What? That's what I'm talking about.
If you are a first-time watcher of the Politically Conscious show, we basically try to raise the consciousness of our community by informing them on politics and trying to weed through the propaganda. Is why our motto is, if you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. And so I have my brother Emil Bryant from the left of things. If you will, just give a super quick background so we can get to everything, because it is election day. So we're going to do our regular show and get to election day coverage as well. So if you will, just a quick background, and we'll introduce Leo as well.
It is election day, and this is what political candidates hope for. They want to get to the crux of it. The crux of it is the truth. Always tell the truth, tell it early, tell it often. When I consult with a political candidate, I tell them that the people can handle it. They need the information to make great decisions. And if you want them to vote for you, they got to trust you. So tell the truth, tell it early, tell it often, and bad news never gets better with time.
Leo, thanks for being with us. You come from the right of things. And so if you will, give your introduction, and we'll play our first clip to get started with today's show.
Well, great. Yeah, this is Leo Smith, and here in Atlanta, formerly with the Republican National Committee as a strategist, as well as with the Georgia Republican Party. I run a government relations and public affairs company called Engage Futures.
I love it. Well, let's get this thing started. This is something that recently made the news. I feel like the quickness of politically changing subjects is quicker than it's ever been in our lifetime, but it may just be part of the social media age, but I call it somewhat of the Trump effect, if you will. But let's go play this first cut and see what you guys have to say about it, if you will. All right, y'all. Give me 1 second. All right, here we go. Let me cue it up.
Is Trump really trying to play in our faces with this strategic messaging about Nigeria? So he just called Nigeria a country of particular concern because, in his words, Christians are being slaughtered. And he is talking about the 3,100 Christians who've sadly been killed, right? But we need to slow that right down, because when you use faith like that and you ignore the Muslims dying too, it starts to feel like their lives don't count. And more than that, it hides what's actually driving the violence, because do you really think that this is about religion? Anyway, I need you guys to stick with me so you can see what's actually going on here, right? It's the same conflict, same killers, and this isn't new. It's chaos that's been brewing for years. Armed groups, gunmen, rogue herders, all moving through gaps that the governments have failed to fill, right? Isn't this the same play that we've seen in Haiti, Sudan, DRC? Convenient? Break the state, then swoop in with a savior story. Why now? Why Nigeria? Well, here's what they're not saying, right? Nigeria's got $40 billion in oil exports, some of the largest gas reserves in Africa, solid minerals, gold, lithium, tin, resources that maybe the US needs, especially in a Cold War with China. And it's not just what's underground, is it? It's the land. The Middle Belt grows the food that feeds the nation, fertile, rain-fed, high yield. And guess where the most violence hits? Right there. And I need to clarify, right? People aren't being killed just because they're Christian. They're being killed because they're in the way. And many of them happen to be Christian because that's what it dominates that area, right? So this isn't just about faith. It's about land control, food and power. That same zone full of ginger farms, mineral rich soil, and foreign players are circling. The Gates Foundation invested in smallholder farming, agri-tech, yield targets. This is not a conspiracy, right? This is public record. But when the West enters through aid, it rarely ever stops at support. And some will say that these killers don't move alone, right? They're backed, tolerated, or armed by whoever's buying access. Local counterparts, foreign deals, the highest bidder. So when you hear Christian persecution, ask what's really at stake and how close the nearest air path is, right? Because China's already in, right? Ports, refineries, defense deals, ammunition, factories. And now Trump wants Congress to get involved. That's not just concern. That's positioning. Because when America talks about saving Christians overseas, come on, man. Is this really about faith? It looks like it might be a green light. It moves money, activates voters, justifies presence. And while that's happening, he's also saying, you know what? Maybe we should save Nigeria's best talent and make them come over and move to America. So which is it? Are you worried about the people dying, or are you more concerned about scouting the ones who survive? That's not rescue, that's resource control. So what's the play? If I'm Nigeria, I tighten internal defense, limit foreign boots. If I'm a citizen, start asking who's funding the next rescue mission. This isn't about God, is it? What is it about? Nigeria's rise, the deals, the land, the leverage. Have they made it too powerful to ignore? Anyway, let's talk.
Don't know who that sister is, Emil, but I'll let you weed through it. Any propaganda from your perspective, or is she on point?
No, she's on point. And you got to remember that Nigeria is the most populous nation in on the continent of Africa. They have probably the greatest brain export. That is, their talented people are all over Europe, America, and other places around the world. They're consistently the most intelligent people in America right now by the number of degrees and the types of work that they do. Their education and training when they come here is bar none above reproach. So this is not just about Christian versus Muslim. In fact, if you know anything about Nigeria, you know that the south and southern central regions of Nigeria are primarily Christian, and the northern regions are primarily Muslim. But there's a reason that that divide exists. It's not just historical religious migrations. There's also the British influence, and you have to remember that the British favored the Christian. And so the southern regions of Nigeria tend to have more resources. They tend to have more material wealth versus the north, which is starving and struggling relative to the south. So there's a lot of divides happening here that look like Christian versus Muslim, but actually are ethnic, they're regional, and they're material. So you cannot just simply say, listening to the president, oh, a bunch of Christians were slaughtered, we're going to do something about that, especially this particular president who has a history of finding ways to make himself and this nation benefit from words that he says versus actions that he does.
Good stuff. Leo, I'll let you jump in. Again, I don't know that sister. Sounds like she might be from actual Nigeria just based on her accent. So I don't know if I'm right about that. But anything that you saw in that, because even the last thing that Emil said, he says this president has a habit of this, but he says for the benefit. And so maybe it's being proposed as something, but at the end of the day, if it is a political benefit, is that the win, or how do you see it, basically?
One of the things that are both refreshing about Trump and also a challenge when it comes to Trump is because the global Cold War that relates to the marketplace has always been fought behind closed door in hush-hush without most Americans getting to see how it occurs. Trump does the global market force war openly and in public. We already know that Trump and most Americans want him to sort of keep China in its place, to keep it from becoming a world dominator, to have some of the forces that some people feel are socially an antipathy to the globe, keep them at bay. So that means suppressing China's market force, its partnerships, etc. Who's one of the biggest countries that China's partnered with in the last 20 years? Nigeria. There's been multiple billions of dollars in promised investment, over $30 billion in investment between China and Nigeria. China building infrastructure in Nigeria, mining Nigeria for its elements. So, the sister, she's brilliant in her analysis, but I find it kind of suspicious that she leaves the China element out of it, because China is more of a threat to Nigeria than Trump is. Now, Trump is using the Christian persecution as a reason to exert the leverage that he's been putting on China all over about everything from soybeans to, whatever. So this is just politics being played out in front of your own eyes. But I find it interesting that she didn't mention China's abuse of Nigeria.
Let me ask a question about that, and then we'll move on to the next clip. And so, this is why I could Emil, you're kind of fading in and out. I don't know if you noticed it on your end. Okay, he's coming. He'll figure it out, hopefully. All right. But again, y'all are the experts. I'm moderating, if you will. But just in my attempt to pay attention to what's happened over the years with the relationship that China has made in Nigeria and throughout the continent, I've highlighted on my mental dialogue show, which I see behind my head, I've highlighted that I think it is wise for us as African Americans to get better position with that our African brethren, if we want to see it that way, that they have the ability to navigate who they want to make relationships with. Whereas because of our Americanized viewpoint and what's happened to us historically in this country, we, in my opinion, generally speaking, we have a tendency to assume if there is a relationship with a Black person and some other group that they have the one up on us. And I'm like, no, don't doubt our brothers and sisters. They may be making a relationship with that country versus us, and that the propaganda will be, China's abusing them. I'm not saying I'm right, but I'm just kind of throwing it out since you said it that way. How do we not know Nigeria's line? Because at the great political interest, goes all kind of ways. So, there's some exploitation, there's some mutual benefit, whatever. Outside looking in, you can call it what you want, but it's all propaganda. So who knows Nigeria isn't making that relationship because it's better for them? What are your thoughts on that?
Just quickly on that, and I think that's a worthy concern. And I agree with you that we should be more trans-African in our concerns because there's opportunity there, but there's just also opportunity to do good. But Nigerian economists themselves say that they need to shift the relationship. So it is true that we got one Nigerian perspective in that young lady. There are other Nigerian perspectives. There are economists in Nigeria who agree that though they are independently seeking these partnerships with other countries, that China's partnership is unequally weighted, and they want to shift how China's partnering with them.
All right.
Emil, you want to make a point on that, Montoya?
Okay.
In fact, I would tell you this, that China is using its economic lever masterfully right now in all of the continent of Africa, specifically Nigeria, but not exclusively. They're all over the continent doing exactly this. And the problem with China doing this is there's no counterweight like there used to be. So at one time, the West was the weight that China is exerting, and now China is exerting the weight that the West once had. And so what's frustrating to see, especially as people who think more trans-Africanly or across those borders as Black people across the globe, we don't see a healthy balance of using those forces to benefit the people. And that problem exists in Nigeria and among other countries. Nigeria's corruption is off the chain. And so we're not hearing that part being addressed. And the corruption is feeding that weighted imbalance from China and or the West. So you're still seeing some problems. There's a lot of unrest within Nigeria, especially among the youth, as they see this misappropriation of the resources that Nigeria has. That young lady was talking about all of those resources and how powerful Nigeria could be with those resources. And yet there is a healthy problem that they haven't yet solved with how those resources are coming back to the people and distributed internally. So there's a lot of factors at play here, and Trump is going to capitalize on all of them to make himself and this nation the benefactor of all of that unrest.
True.
Hey, good stuff. Thank y'all for that insight. Could I say we're experiencing some of that similar unrest currently in a new way as Americans, that feels like what, as you just mentioned, the Nigerian youth have been complaining about for a number of years, where it seems like we're starting to feel it a little bit just based on what we're experiencing right now as a country. Let me see. We've got a comment. Let's see if the comment, put that up real quick. Roger says, good discussion on China from our man B House. All right, let's go to our next cut, y'all, and keep it moving. All right. Let's bring it home.
Food security is so important and vital for everyone. For the president to say that these are Democrats that it affects, all our data shows that more people that are Republicans in red states, in red rural counties, are more SNAP recipients than anywhere else. But it doesn't matter. Everyone needs to eat. And if we have all paid federal tax dollars out of our paychecks, out of our corporate taxes. All of these go to the federal government. They've already been funded. He just has to press the button to make sure that these benefits get to these people, these seniors, these kids, these disabled folks, hardworking people that just don't make enough to be able to afford all of their groceries. So we have SNAP benefits for them. And so in the city of Atlanta, we took bold steps yesterday to issue a moratorium on water cutoffs. So if you owe a water bill, we're not going to turn off your water, or evictions, because we know that if you were dependent upon $400 from SNAP, you may just use that $400 off of your rent to pay for food, because we have to eat. It's a necessity. And so if someone needs to use that money that they otherwise would have gotten from SNAP to pay a water bill, don't pay that water bill. Go ahead on and pay for food, and we'll deal with the water, and we'll deal with that rent on the back end from all of our apartments that we have through Atlanta Housing, et cetera.
Mayor, I want to read to you a second part from that message that Simone read to you, because it does seem like the President of the United States is doing a pretty radical about-face just in the past hour, which makes me think maybe he's actually seen some of the polling about how people feel about SNAP benefits, how they feel about the nature of the shutdown, and who it is they're blaming. In addition to what Simone read, he wrote, "If we are given the appropriate legal direction by the court, it will be my honor to provide the funding, just like I did with military and law enforcement pay." What is your message to the president about the position that his inaction is putting mayors like you and your constituents in?
Have a heart, care. Give the people what they are asking for and what they need. Republicans control the White House, the Senate, and Congress. And now, when you don't give people the SNAP benefits, and you've already suspended the benefits of Medicaid, Medicare expansion, we are talking about lives at stake, and people need the president to be presidential. And that means to go ahead on and allow these SNAP benefits to go to people. Thank you to these federal judges that have stood up and said that it is illegal for the president and the White House and these folks to hold back SNAP benefits. Thank you to that federal judge.
Leo, we see Atlanta Mayor Dickinson highlighting his plea to the president from his perspective. All right, again, since we weed through the propaganda, let me highlight that it is on in MSNBC. So the perspective is going to be typically skewed a little bit. Your perspective on what you're seeing, any propaganda in that, anything that's real in that from your perspective?
Well, first, let me say that it's good that the SNAP benefits are being released as of this hour, right? Right now, folks are going to be getting their benefits. The amount of the emergency fund that's being released is not enough for a long-term solution. Obviously, no one was looking for a long-term solution. The shortest term solution was punted by the Democrats, because the shortest term solution was to accept the CR, the continuing resolution. None of this would be happening right now if they had just accepted the continuing resolution. So let's just be clear on that. MSNBC is not going to be clear on that, because they are they lean far left, and they've lean Democrat on all things. I want to compliment, as we are here on Election Day, we're going to talk about elections a little later. You've got a mayor there that was, I think, very sensitive and very responsive. That's probably why his reelection is not even a contention issue today, because he is fairly responsive. He's had to deal with water issues before. Generally, he's not the one that's making an executive decision to cut off water. The infrastructure for water in Atlanta is so bad that people are without water often in Atlanta, and we're always on a boil water alert. So good for him. And just to add a little bit more levity, Emil, you don't wear the pain, but he was sporting his Atlanta Falcons jersey. And it isn't the snap in the Atlanta football game that's the problem. It's the kicker. Can we get a kicker, Mayor? The snap is fine. Just a little levity. I'm sorry. This is a serious issue. People need.
Absolutely. I saw.
And Atlanta wants to win football games.
Yeah, hey, our good friend Shelly, I think I saw this on his Facebook page. He had like a meme where a lady of the streets was, leaned into the window saying, "Hey, what do you want, Daddy?" He says, what? Say what can I get? What can I get for $40? And the answer was, "Can we get a kicker for the?"
Can you kick a field goal?
Yeah, can you kick a field goal?
Right? Can you kick a field goal? So look, that is the privilege, Emil, of us as Atlanta elites. We just into our sports and our entertainment, But people truly are suffering. They're worried. There's food worry. People should not have to worry about whether or not they're going to eat. And this leverage, this little tug of war between the partisan elements of one-upping the other party is horrible. It's really bad. And Emil, I think you and I agree that this is a horrible place that people are being used as pawns.
Any quick thoughts on that, Emil? I want to give y'all a comment from Governor Kemp too. But any thoughts to that clip?
I don't agree with Shelley often. I don't agree with Leo all the time, but we are very clear here. So I'm going to say it very bluntly: to hell with all of them. They are not human beings right now. They are being everything that we have despised about politics. And what's frustrating is we can see them. They're not doing it behind closed doors, and they're not responding to all of the things that need to be responded to. You have federal judges that said, do this thing and get this money out. And he's like, oh, it's going to take me weeks or perhaps months to get it out. That's horse manure. You can't tell me that the people who are needing those benefits, who can't get them, are less important than winning against the libtards or the Republicrats or whatever you want to call them. This is not about that. Feed these people. And to Leo's point, he's absolutely right. The Democrats could have, but they finally show a spine when people's bellies are at stake. This is when they show a spine. They're supposed to show a spine way before this, when the One Big Beautiful Bill Act was pending and it was just a bill and not an act. That's when they were supposed to shut it down. That was supposed when there was no jeopardy and people's bellies weren't going hungry. This is not the time to show spine when people's daily ration, these are people who are on the edge, man. This is what makes me so frustrated. These are not people who can go 30, 40, 50 days without food or can't go without a paycheck. These are people who live on the bloody edge every single month. And these benefits keep them from falling off a cliff. And now the president has the nerve to say that if you don't have USDA approval, you can't offer benefits or discounts to people who are on SNAP so they can find a way to stretch their little measly dollar. Are you kidding me? Be a bloody human being. Get this stuff to the people who need it. And Democrats, find a spine when it matters and not when people are hungry.
So taking it, off of what Emil's passion is about that, and I share that passion with Emil. This is disgusting, okay? And so here's what voters ought to think about. We're going to have an election after today, going into 2026, 2028, look, we better start lobbying as a people that if they ever do this crap again, they don't get to get paid either. It is a shame. Many of you may not know this, but while no one else is getting paid and people aren't getting support from the federal government, from tax dollars that you and I pay, that the Congress people are getting paid, even while they're not doing their job. We have to change that law. That's one that I will work with you, anybody, Emil. Let's bind together. Let's start those petitions. Let's lobby our Congress. Let's get our delegations from our various states to insist that be changed.
Let me jump in. If I recall, Leo, that didn't used to be the rule, right? There was a time where they would have also not have gotten paid.
Correct.
Of course, obviously, in today's time, our congressmen are doing well, and they would be A-OK. So all the more reason for them not to get paid, because it's not going to hurt them like the very people that we are concerned about.
The House isn't even in session.
Let me get me
Johnson needs to bring them back into session.
Sorry.
I can't even believe that.
All right. I want to because here's a reality that even amongst this craziness, that is still a reality. Here's something that Governor Kemp said that I think still has to be part of this. Unfortunately, as passionate as we are, here's what Governor Kemp had to say just in general. He said, if we do this for SNAP, what about early learning programs? What about TSA agents? What about the military? What about the National Guard? Where does this end? I think we just have to at least bring that comment to the table, even though we would like for people to eat right now. Any thoughts from you, Emil, on just Governor Kemp's making that point in the middle of all of this? And I don't know if I see that as political as much as him speaking a truth from my perspective. Your thoughts?
Yeah, you heard me say it, that people are on the edge. SNAP is not something that I want to play with. I hear everything he's saying, and he's right. The federal government needs to get its act together post haste. But I'm very comfortable saying it this way. What about SNAP? Yeah. What about early learning? Children can go without early learning for a little while, but they can't go without food. The National Guard and the military can go without their specific benefits for a little while, but people can't go without food. Right now, you have people who are on the edge of malnutrition.
Gotcha.
First and foremost, let's get them taken care of. We can resolve the rest of this later.
All right. Any thought on that comment from Governor Kemp, Leo?
No, I think Emil recognized that the governor was responding about whether or not it's the state's role or the federal government's role. And he's saying, how much of the federal government's role should I be taking over? And that is a very responsible concern on behalf of the governor. And at the same time, as a Republican governor, for him to be saying that he just went ahead and delineated all the things that need to be immediately addressed. And he's a Republican conservative governor. So that just shows the level of abnormality that we're dealing with right here.
Got you. All right, I'm gonna hit y'all with this comment from the sister that I follow. Her name is Dottie Reynolds. I think this is another deeper thought into all of this. I would love to get both of your opinions. Leo, we'll start with your response to it if y'all can bear with me reading through it. But she says, no food stamps is the way through. The benefits of families not receiving food stamps isn't just forcing people to become too self-reliant. It is also ushering in a mass identity reckoning. I am never in favor of letting children, the disabled, or the elderly starve. Still, all things work together for the greater good, even when the process feels cruel. It sounds heartless plus cold, and it is, but that doesn't make it false. This administration operates with the meritocracy mindset, smaller government, fewer safety nets, and a belief that only the best deserve to thrive, and if some suffer along the way, so be it. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and thus no food stamps one is about to shatter a very old illusion. Only Black, brown, and undocumented receive welfare. White Americans are the largest group on food stamps, according to USDA data, FY 2023. 35.4% of all recipients are white, 25.7% are Black, 15.6% are Hispanic. That's around 14.8 million white Americans receiving benefits out of roughly 41.7 million total participants. Yes, Black families receive more capital by race, but even if 100% of Black Americans were on SNAPs, millions of white Americans would still rely on it. And when the reality meets the propaganda, the psychological crash that follows has a name, cognitive dissonance. It's what happens when a belief you've held your entire life collides with hard data and your brain can't reconcile the two. This is the reckoning. The narrative that only Black, brown, or undocumented people depend on welfare has kept Americans divided for decades. This time when the system breaks, the mirror won't be facing them. It'll be facing the ones who built it and those that upheld it. SNAP pumped nearly $100 billion into the economy last year. When the spending disappears, the economics of it all won't stop at the poverty line. It'll ripple through small businesses, service providers, and yes, even multimillionaire friends, because you're still broke compared to the ones in charge. When the bottom stops spending, the middle doesn't sell nearly as much. No food stamps means less spending power, and less spending means reality sets in for everyone. This is a class war disguised as race and sex wars, designed to keep everyone distracted while the real power consolidates. So yes, no food stamps is bringing about the end of psychosis and the delusion that you are safe while others suffer. The separation you think exists from you and them does not. Powerful as hell to me. Brother Leo, your thoughts?
I need to know this sister. This sister understands the art of war. She understands discipline and perseverance for a better result. I like to use the phrase, out of an abundance of love comes an overtolerance of failure. And the sister's words allude to the idea that sometimes by giving someone a quick fix, you're actually giving them a lasting doom. And I think that's sort of the element here. Black people in America are better at squeezing water out of a rock. We have a certain resilience. And the reality is that the chicken that will come home to roost is really going to be about the stats that she provided, that there are more white people in the South who are going to be hurt by what these politicians are doing, and Republicans leading the way right now with this game, and Democrats too, both of them. But for Donald Trump to think that this is primarily not affecting a lot of his voters, he's obviously wrong. She knows it, and that if this lasts, there is going to be an uprising against all politicians. They're not just going to blame the white Republicans who have been saying we're here for you. They're going to blame all politicians, because that's what folks who think that they are above and beyond and transcendent of being the victim, they get a grievance, they throw their grievance on the government in entirety. January 6th, people. So this pain that they are playing with as a way to motivate and get leverage on the other, it's going to hurt all of them in a way that we saw in January 6th, but perhaps even multifold. This is scary stuff, and this sister is aware of it, but she wants the strategy she has is to hold the line on it so that the people will rise up against the system. And so I understand her strategy. I'm just not so sure that the people have the will and the mettle to do that.
Emil, any thoughts to the sister?
First of all, Montoya, what's her name again? Because I gotta follow her on social media.
Dottie Reynolds.
Dottie Reynolds.
Reynolds.
Mm-hmm. Got it. I'm just making sure I know who she is, because man, she's powerful, and she's right. Besides the fact that she said this administration is meritocratic, she was 100% on point, because this administration definitely is not, and they're proving that every day that they are not a meritocracy. They have no compunction about the fact that they are not picking people who are competent, and part of the reason why we're here is because they chose to do that. But more importantly, her message is very, very strong. It's going to hurt, but perhaps many of us have been lulled into a false sense of security by the things that this government has done. In fact, I would argue that her premise that it seems cruel is probably the right premise to have overall. Now, I just was very passionate about empty bellies, especially of children, but of anybody who's going through and is living on the edge. But here's the problem. What you gonna do about it? What you gonna do about it? Are you going to let these politicians continue to use you as pawns? Are you going to listen to the jingoism? Are you going to listen to the false patriotism? Because if it's America first, American bellies should be first. If it's America first, then American roads and clean water should be first. But we're not having those discussions. And so if it's America first, then it should be American clean soil. The USDA under FDR started the food stamp program to take surplus agricultural goods and get people employed and move those surplus agricultural goods to people who needed them. The food stamp program was a way to help recover after the Great Depression. So we have America first in the genes of that program. It was to move money to where it was needed and move food at the same time. Now we're stuck because people don't understand that the premise behind the food stamps and now SNAP program is lost because it became a political football. And the problem with it being a political football is that everybody who's watching the game isn't benefiting from the game. So it's time for people to stand up and start thinking about voting everybody out so we can have a clean slate of people who look at and respond to the people.
Now, good stuff. I wanted to throw out a little context that I like to bring to things. Emil, that's my thing, context and perspective as a mental activist. And so I would like to put some of the numbers in context because I love what she highlighted in referencing, like you said, in a sense, who's actually on SNAP, if you will, still highlighting, because most people give one or the other. She gave it just straight, no chaser. Hey, here's who's on SNAP, but per capita, it's an issue for us, right? Just per capita as African Americans, more of us per capita are on it in that sense, but the majority are whites. But I still want to put those numbers in perspective because sometimes we just hear about the 41 million participants or who are waiting to receive it. Just so that we have perspective as Americans, the propaganda, the way we're taught to as a political football. I love how you said that, Emil. I just want to put in perspective for anybody watching that we take a lot of what we think about it from the propaganda versus what it really is. And it really is 41 million Americans. If we got 10 of us here, one would be on SNAP. Like that's what the 41 million equates to when it comes to the number of people that are in America. So if 10 of us was on this thing, one of us higher than likely would be on SNAP. The reason that one matters is because the way that we're taught to think about SNAP, let's make it 20 people so I can just get these numbers right. So if we got 20 people, we would have 2 on SNAP, right? And so what happens is we talk about SNAP in this way as if somehow, if we didn't have to pay out all of this, it would benefit the rest of us. We worry about the fraud or whatever. But if we got 2, let's say half of the people on SNAP actually were committing fraud. Now, the numbers are this, just so you know, because I've looked these up and know them. About out of the people that use SNAP, 25% have kind of permanently spent their lives on SNAP. The other 75% on average are on and off within a 2-year period. So I would offer that, generally speaking, that 75%, take it for a minute, get through a period, and they're okay. Some may go on and off. I'm just being realistic about it. I'm not trying to paint one picture or whatever. That 25%, not saying that all of them are abusing it, but that's just the reality of the numbers. So if we put in perspective, it's only 1 out of 10 Americans, right? And then you listen to what I'm saying, we literally talk about it as a political football as if somehow we will be getting that money back. For example, SNAP specifically, just SNAP, not the housing, but SNAP specifically, on average as Americans, on average, we keep 86% of every dollar we earn. Now, of course, that varies based on your tax bracket, but if you just put it in aggregate, we keep 86%. SNAP, we would keep 85.49. Like SNAP is that minimal when it comes to what actually happens with the federal budget. But the thing is, it would be foolish for us to think the government would give us the money back even if they did not. Like that's the bigger point I'm making. It would be foolish to think we would get the money in our pockets. They would just move it and use it somewhere else. We're never getting that 14 cents back. Like that's not going to happen based on how our government runs. So I want to bring that context and perspective that it's a political football that we complain about that 9 out of 10 of us don't even have to worry about. We're arguing over it as if they would give the money back to us. They're going to just move the money somewhere else. Like right. That's the reality of those benefits. And then if you are an African-American on SNAP, one last piece of context. If you're worried about the illegal aliens, your SNAP benefits would not change whether they gave them to them or not. So I'm just showing you how the propaganda pits you saying, because that is a reality. There are people in New York, there are people in Chicago, they're watching people that are probably not documented correctly get some money to live in a building. Like if you're struggling and you see that, I get the disdain for it. I understand the natural propensity to say, dang, look at what's happening over there. They're giving them this much money to live there. Like I would feel that way if I'm in that situation. I get it. What you don't get is you wouldn't get a different amount in your check if they didn't get to do that. That doesn't make it. I'm not saying it's okay. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just showing you how the propaganda pits us against each other, and nothing would change in our money if it were different. That's the reality I wanted to bring to the table. Any thoughts on that, fellas? Either one of you, jump in.
Yeah, no. So, yeah, the stats are there. And the problem with the stats is that people don't understand how to read those numbers anymore. It's called numeracy, and we don't have a lot of numeracy in America anymore. And the problem with innumeracy, just like you have man, the word just fell out of my head. I'm sorry. But just like you have problems with reading comprehension, you have problems with number comprehension. And the problem with this is that people are starting to fall for what others are telling them without actually doing the homework you just did. The numbers are clear. This is why I can't stand it and say, look at all this money going to foreign aid. We should be taking care of people at home. We do both. Just like we take care of veterans and elderly, we can take care of foreign aid and SNAP. We can take care of people who need a helping hand. It's like, oh, look at all the money going to police. There's none for firefighters. Of course, there's police and firefighters. Stop acting like you can't see two things happening at the same time. That dollar splits many different ways when we send it to the federal government. And we need to stop asking these dumb questions and start asking the hard questions. But fraud, waste, and abuse is a real thing. But I promise you, it is a drop in the bucket compared to how money is spent intentionally in the federal government. People are using the federal government as a catch-all for all the things that are wrong in America. The problem is that the federal government is actually doing a pretty good job of delivering most of its benefits. But what you can see right in front of you, based on the numbers you just gave, Montoya, is where the problems actually lie. You don't need to look for fraud, waste, and abuse when you have people misappropriating and using funds in all sorts of ways that are right in your face.
Leo, any thoughts to what I brought to the table? Just again, context.
I mean, look, we're dealing with a situation again where people are hungry and they're concerned. So to get them to figure out what the word enumeration means is probably not high on their priority, fellas. Okay. Yeah. So I get it. And also when people are looking at a piece of a pie and they see the piece of a pie sort of being dwindled away, they're not thinking about how it was appropriated or who voted on it or whatever. They're going, I see the pie going over there. So Montoya, Emil, while I have understanding of what you guys are saying, I don't think it really deals with the human nature aspect of who people are and how we see things. And I think politics and the competition for resources that I define politics as, right. It has to deal with both the perception of resources and the reality. And those are the two things. So you're right. We can do two things at once. But what y'all are describing is a higher level two things than the lower level two things that are also possible. And that is to challenge your government on making sure they're fair and equitable. But at the same time, have a discussion of waste, fraud, and abuse. You can do both at the same time.
No, good stuff. All right. So y'all were the two on one of our shows that highlighted having two formidable parties, if you will. Emil, you've already passionately said you don't think this is the correct time. I have Professor Galloway, if you've heard him, pretty popular now on social media. He's highlighting that he felt like in this situation, the Democrats were formidable. So I'll let y'all hear his perspective and get y'all thoughts on this as well.
So traditionally, it's a losing prospect to shut the government down in exchange, asking for a change in policy. Americans don't think that's how you negotiate policy. Having said that, I think it might be different this time. And the Democrats are being shockingly strategic here. And that is, they're not saying get rid of the tariffs nonsense. They're not saying we want more input into when you run military missions. We want you to stop rounding up gardeners and housekeepers. They're going after a very divisive issue amongst Republicans and a very unpopular issue in that you mentioned the tax credits for Obamacare. So they're being very pointed. They're, I think, being very disciplined here. And I think they actually, and to your point, it looks like they will come out of this the winners. Also, I'm a big fan of the shutdown. I think that we just look so weak. It's like Leader Jeffries and Senator Schumer, wet meat blanket. I think instead of just clutching our pearls all the time, we need to go a little bit gangster and say we're no longer going to fund a government that is essentially descending into fascism. This deal to carve up TikTok, the government's funding black sites to incarcerate who appear to be American citizens. We are going to remember this. And to the letter of the law, we're not going to engage in retribution, but once we have a real DOJ again, we are going to remember what's going to happen. We're going to unwind the TikTok deal being carved up and handed out to your Republican donors at an 80% discount. We are going to remember who supported these black sites. We are going to remember who decided to pull the security detail of former generals. I am sick of clutching our pearls. And so I absolutely think we should shut down the government. I think the Democrats are being smart here. One issue, we want to restore tax credits for Obamacare, which is hugely popular. And by the way, affects more poor Republicans in red states who are much more dependent on government handouts than blue states.
Emil, again, I know you passionately said the time is not now. That's Professor Galloway's perspective. Said he likes it. Obviously, he's admitting he's coming from the left of things, as we asked you to present on this on our show as well.
I hate agreeing with him because I have been so passionate. But if you're looking at it strictly from politics, then he's right. The problem is that I'm a human being first, and I'm frustrated because people are taking this political tack that is harming people at their core. I understand why he said what he said, and I agree with it philosophically, but practically, people are hungry. And so the Democrats have to decide just how far they want to go with the political side of this before the practical side becomes a problem they're going to feel. So yeah, he's right. It might be to their benefit in the near term, but honestly, what Leo and I said earlier, I think stands. I think there's going to be a reckoning where everybody on both sides is going to feel some significant pain at the next primary, because people are not going to forget that they couldn't put together a functioning government that allowed people to eat when they were hungry.
We got Meta Brahman, and hope I'm saying his name, Brother Brahmana, says, but if the burden of the shutdown is being placed on the poor and working class that are mostly Democrats, the shutdown politics doesn't work, even if it's a worthy cause. That was his thoughts. Leo, I'll go ahead and let you respond to it. Maybe if you want to respond to him as well as to the clip. Your thoughts, brother.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the working class is primarily Democrats. So I think that's something that I would encourage the brother to look more closely at. The whole politics of just look at it from this perspective. When I'm in South Georgia, there are people who are uber conservative in South Georgia who identify as Democrats because they're still stuck in the Dixiecrat model. They're working class, they're poor, a lot of them are farmers. So let's be careful about playing the game when it comes to economic issues in the same way that the politicians and the political consultants force us to do. They're forcing you to say that only the Democrats are being hurt by this issue or only the Republicans. The fact is, a lot of Americans, again, people wouldn't have rioted against DC if it weren't impacting them in a way that they needed to have some way to let out their anger and grievance. Now, how they voiced it might have sounded like they were just Republicans, but there are a lot of Democrats in there too who then jumped into being recent Republicans. We got to really take a more global perspective on what pain does to people. Okay. Now, the other issue about Scott Galloway, that the brother left and moved to London.
Galloway did? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now he's all of a sudden reinserting himself back into the discussion when elections are happening. It just seems like to me he's just making smart moves for his business. Let me go back and talk about America after I left America and went to London, but I'm going to come back just for a moment since we're at a heightened point where I need some attention again. I think he's a brilliant man, but I'm not going to ignore the fact that he is so wealthy and so isolated and bubbled from the real issues that whenever it gets uncomfortable for him, he can just leave. That's not a real American, in my opinion.
All right, fair enough. Again, that's what y'all are here for, to read through it all. All right, let's get into this. I think this right here is a brother Gary Chambers. I've played cuts from him before. He's breaking down a black tax issue, and this is something I'll highlight. I'm picking it because I think this is an opportunity to learn. I think it leads us into some of the election talk as well. So he's highlighting an example in Louisiana that I think will lead us into how you guys prepare for election days as political experts. I think that's a way for people to learn as well. But let's definitely look at this cut.
Now, I ain't trying to create no beef between working class white folks and working class black folks, but I want to illuminate the truth about black tax dollars and the myth that they told you to black folks to pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, they picking up white folks every day with black bootstraps and telling us to pick ourselves up. Let me show you. So I live in an all black neighborhood, and I want to ride around my subdivision and show you how all through this contractor, Barrier Construction, has been in my neighborhood for the last few weeks working on this project. So I waited. I wanted to see how many black people work for this company, because when I saw them come in, there were no black people involved at all. They have been in my neighborhood for weeks, and I want to show you how in an all-black neighborhood where black people are paying taxes for the last 30 years, that nobody black is coming in here to fix their road. So when we talk about the economic conditions that exist within black communities, I want you to pay attention to all of these things where black people are paying into a tax system. Even if you're a renter, the person who owns the home that you rent takes your rent money to pay the property taxes. So you are contributing to the tax system. If you are a if you go to the store and you're paying sales taxes, a lot of the road projects are paid for through sales taxes. So black people are certainly paying the sales taxes that pay for these roads. But the jobs that come from these projects and the contracts that go to these contractors who get these projects go to people who don't look like us and then don't hire us when they get these contracts. One of the ways that this can be addressed is very simple. Black city council members can start the process by saying, I will not vote for these big contracts. Set a threshold. If it's over this amount of money and it's going towards projects that benefit my community, if your company is not reflective of this community, that I will not vote for your contract. Good contractor, great product that you do, but I want people who see investing in black people as a part of their business model, and I'm not going to support companies that are not reflective of that until we get to a point where black-owned businesses are at a point of parity or some level of equity in the placement that we get in contracts, because black contractors were already getting a low number of contracts in the city of Baton Rouge. Sharon Weston Broome increased that, which is a great thing while she was mayor. We don't know what this mayor is going to do. Now, I ain't trying to create no beef between working class white folks and working class black folks, but I'm just trying to say, if you looked outside your door and every time somebody was doing work out there, there was never anybody that looked like you in any of the companies that were doing the work, you take an issue with that too, because that looks like taxation without representation. And that's un-American, ain't it?
I love the example. Leo, we'll start with you. I love the example because as when we say to our viewers, we want to raise consciousness. Our show is called Politically Conscious. I'm a fan of Gary Tim because for me, he teaches me the details. But the reason I love that cut is because throughout my lifetime in pushing for people to be involved in politics, I think that very issue, whether you agree with him or not, is the issue that for people who struggle with, is it two birds of the same? Is it two, a bird with two on the same two heads on the same bird, or are the Democrats really for against us or against us? I think this is where we miss. When I say the civil rights movement, the biggest issue they were most concerned with was protection of the law. They were talking about their tax dollars being equated in a manner that was equal. That's the part that isn't taught in school when you learn about Dr. King, but that was a big focus of the civil rights movement. And so by missing that information, we think that it doesn't help to be involved politically. But at the end of the day, when you say, as he suggested, pull yourself up, well, all my tax dollars that should be giving out the services that we should all have in a at least in some type of normal way, I'm having to make up for that because they're not coming to my district like they should. And that's what I think people miss when they get tired and get apathetic and say, man, I don't want to vote for anything, or even when sometimes you said, Leo, we should do for ourselves. But again, you're politically involved. So you're including the politics with doing for ourselves. A lot of people say it without the politics. And in my opinion, this is the miss. Go ahead, Leo.
No, I think Brother Chambers is bringing up something that is very interesting, and it's good to see someone like him making those statements. I don't know where he lives or how he lives, whether he does what I do, where I actually get involved, create policy that I can take advantage of, and then I introduce the policy to other Black people so that they can take advantage of it as well. That's the process. And I find it harder to do that actually in places like he's talking about, where the leadership and the predominant voter is actually Black or brown. And yet they're giving up the ability to have that kind of impact in Mississippi and Louisiana and Alabama. These folks are giving up that ability to have that impact. So even if I'm in Clayton County, Atlanta, Metro Atlanta, Georgia, and I hear people complaining about racism or white folks, I'm like, no, it ain't the Republican Party that's messing you up. It ain't the Democrat Party. It's the dollar bill party that you ain't taking advantage of. Because what he described there was people not knowing how to use the dollar bill party, the party that is moved by money and opportunity. And yes, Black people are usually blocked by their representation from being participants, because when a Black person rises up out of that community and gets on the city council or gets engagement with those people and with that corporation that he's meeting, they sell the Black people out and don't tell them how the game is being played so other Black people can join them in competing, because they're worried about the small piece of the pie. We need to challenge that sort of thinking. You know, the Black person who gets to the table and doesn't want to tell people what's at the table or teach them how to get there with them. I hope that's what Brother Chambers is doing. Now, funny thing he said is that what if white people looked out and they say, all Black people just working on projects in their community? Well, I mean, heck, white people are used to that. So, I mean, when they had slavery, that happened. So I'm not so sure that's going to motivate white people in a different way.
Hey, well, no, check it out. Let's be honest. Black and white people see his. Let's keep it a bean in the cities, at least. His Latinos.
Yeah, look, man. When I was running several health clubs in Atlanta, I had several health clubs. I had some of my business partners like, "Hey, we should start a school to teach Black people how to do these jobs that these Latinos do. You know, bricklaying and cement work and blah 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 blah." Because that's a real thing, and Black people weren't complaining all that much about that. So, hey, this is a dignity issue that Black people in our own community, we need to talk about as part of the family.
Emil, your thoughts to that cut? Again, I thought it was an opportunity to say, hey, if you're listening to us, this is an example of why we say the vote is important, and it's finding the candidates that won't sell you out. Like, that's all part of it. Unfortunately, we lost Malcolm X right after he had started his own group. And it's one of my favorite speeches from Malcolm X. He literally has a speech where he says, hey, I'm starting this group. It was the start of his group. And he spent almost an hour breaking down of how it was going to be necessary to teach our community political science. Because it wasn't just simply keep doing what we're doing. It was going to be a need to raise the political awareness to understand how to play the game, because it was necessary. And this is after he spent 12 years not mentioning politics because he couldn't as an NOI, but he came to realize, because he's a brilliant man, hey, this don't make any sense. And him and King were secretly, not cool with each other, believe it or not, for people that don't know that. And he saw the benefit of what King was going for when it came to equal protection of the law. They didn't care to sit next to white people. King came from a Black class in Atlanta where they was doing their thing. So why would he ever have cared about being next to white people? He just he wanted equal protection of the law, so that when they built something, it couldn't just be taken. That's how you get the Black Wall Streets getting burned down. That's how you get it could just be taken without recompense. That's the integration. Was if we're integrated throughout the society, you would have to give us equal protection in the courtroom. There's recompense if something happens to us. That's what you've never heard in the history books. Go ahead, Emil.
It was the Organization of African American Unity, and the thing that X was trying to do, and King, especially as he neared his life with the Poor People's Campaign, among others, the context of all of this was, without economic power, you have no power. Exactly. And this is what the brother was saying in Baton Rouge. He was saying very clearly, I don't see my community benefiting from these contracts. So if my community is not benefiting, why would I support anyone who's not helping my community? So those jobs that you saw in that video, those are actually well-paying construction jobs. Those are jobs that make $28, $32 an hour. These are jobs that have benefits. These are jobs that stabilize homes and communities. These are jobs that give people a sense of purpose. And that is how you drive down crime. We've said it on the show many times. If you want to drive down crime, give people jobs worthy of their ability. And the problem here is that you have to have career technical education for those jobs. You have to have workforce development for those jobs. So there has to be a concerted community effort to build up each individual such that they are competitive for those jobs. Then you have to have entrepreneurs who are building the kind of businesses that have track records that can compete for those kinds of contracts and projects. If you don't have that, group of people, also known as a community, that is moving toward that kind of economic parity, you run the risk of missing out. To Leo's point, the dollar bill party is the party of power in America. And all politics in America started from the framers of the Constitution about dollars. They did not riot in the Boston Harbor for tea. They rioted because they were bootleggers. Now, remember this before I go far. They were bootleggers. And the King of England the King of the UK drove down the taxes and undercut their ability to sell bootleg tea. And that's what the riot was for. If that's how the country was founded, you better believe you understand how politics works today. Get your dollars right. And if you don't understand the game, I'll teach it to you simply. Everybody who can compete must compete. Figure out where you're going to fit in, get your weight up, career technical education, workforce development, formal education, entrepreneurship, and stop looking at people and saying, I'm hungry, and start saying, I'm going to grow my food or I'm going to take yours legally.
I love it. And for my soapbox issue, before we jump into this current election, and my soapbox issue, this is, again, in my opinion, another area where the propaganda ran amiss, and I call out conservatives on this when it comes to the DEI stuff. So no matter who was getting more, even if African Americans were 5th on the list or 7th on the list, for all the lists that you saw around here, those tax dollars were ensuring that they're a guidepost to ensure that those contracts were made available. And they are no longer being made available because there's no guidepost when they just want to give it to their friends and nobody comes in the neighborhood looking like you. That can be done now with no recompense. That's what equal protection of the law looks like. And because of our history in this country, affirmative action DEI is served as that guardrail. So you thought you didn't lose anything, you lost a lot. That's the reality of the politics when you understand it on that level. With that said, I want to ask both of these brothers, we are in our extra innings. I don't want to take too much of y'all time, but one of the questions I wanted to ask, it's election day. I don't know if y'all already, I've got to go after this show to go elect, to do my voting, but it is election day. So I wanted people to hear both of yours perspective on how do y'all prepare for election day. I think this is an opportunity for some education since y'all are informed voters. How do y'all prepare for election day typically?
So first and foremost, I'm always paying attention to what's right outside my door, because the potholes, the street lights, the water quality, the air quality, the soil quality, that all matters to me first and foremost. So I'm paying attention to what's right outside my door. I'm looking at the schools around my neighborhood. I'm looking at the schools in the city. And then I'm looking at how my city's faring. So what I'm trying to do is, in increasingly larger sort of areas of concentration, I'm trying to see what's going on around me. And then I get all the way up to the federal level where I can start to understand the issues that affect me and my community very specifically. So I'm not looking for specifically my benefit in terms of, oh, I need more tax dollars returned to me, or I need this. I need to see an effect that things are going well in my community. I measure progress by the least of us. The children who need the best educations are the ones with the parents who have the jobs that don't give them time to go to schools. I want to see them prosper. I want to see people who are hungry eat. I want to see people who are struggle a little bit less. I want to see minimum wages go up. I want to see wages across the board go up. It's easy to measure everything by how prosperous we are. I want to measure things by how well the least of us is doing. So that's my measure for how I gauge issues and candidates so that I can see my community prosper from the bottom up.
Okay. Can I challenge you to be a little more specific, like for your area, just for people to see what that looks like going into a booth? I'm going to go to Leo. I just want you to think about what I just said, Emil, so I can come back to you to tell me what does it look like specifically for maybe the current candidates who's running, because it's, some people's terms end at different terms. So I want to, even if you can, just have you think about it on a more granular level while I let Leo answer that same question.
Well, segueing on how I get prepared, segueing from what Emil just shared, which is a general awareness of the problems and conditions that people are living in, being aware of that, engaging with people going from community to community, even outside of your own community, to see what the real issues are. I used to say, as a Republican strategist, mostly dealing with upward mobility issues, issues of free market, low taxation, smaller government, that I wasn't very interested in urban politics. It's a little messier, a little harder, da 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 da. And so you can get real comfortable in your own circles and not really see the real issues that are driving folks. So I think it's important that right after you vote the previous year, that immediately you have that consciousness and you start engaging. And I think that's a little bit of what Emil does. But, you know, what I start to do very, very specifically, concretely, drilling down, is finding candidates that I can get behind. You know, people who are addressing the issues that he's talking about. This is Casey Brock running for Atlanta Public Schools. Y'all have heard me say on this show that education is like slow brain surgery. We cannot afford to have people creating the mind to vote or not to vote be ignored. And so I'm giving my attention to Atlanta Public Schools. I've gone out to the debates. I've gone out, and when I couldn't make a debate, I try and find a recording of it on YouTube. You know, do something good with that social media. Sometimes it's there on TikTok or YouTube. You can find a recording of it. I wanted to get to know every candidate, from city council in Atlanta to school board. So if I couldn't be there, try and get your 30-second fix from somebody's summary. You know, I have a lot of people who depend on me as a political consultant to tell them what I think. You'd be amazed at the number of people, and maybe you wouldn't because y'all are informed watchers. People just don't know who to vote for. They don't have time for it. So they'll ask people like me. So I produce a little voter guide that I send out to people who have asked me, Leo, tell me who I should be voting for and thinking about. I don't try and tell them too discreetly. I give them pros and cons. Here how, if you vote for them, here's what they might do. Here's what they might not do. Here's their background. I try and give them the bullet points on who's running. Then I actually go out and I start engaging with the precinct areas, etc. Like this morning, I was out at 5:30. I wanted to see what people were thinking, what kind of cars were driving up, who got there first, who was eager. So those are the things that I do even before I cast my ballot. We got to be engaged. Instead of always thinking to run for office, go out and support someone like Casey Brock, and who's running for Atlanta School Board citywide. You can vote for her so that you can actually make a difference and be a kingmaker rather than just a king.
I love it. Again, if y'all don't mind, if I could steal a few more minutes from you, Emil, any thoughts specifically? And again, I think it's an opportunity for our viewers that may are trying to figure this out. What does it look like to be an informed voter? Because here's a reality. Let me not sleep on this. At the end of the day, the majority of the population does not have the capacity to do everything that Leo just talked about. Plus, he's a political consultant, so he's going to go to the nth degree to be better at being a political consultant. So it's not that. But at the same time, when we tell people, don't just be apathetic, don't just be involved, we're trying to tell you more than just vote per se. So there are resources. Like the one thing that I learned years ago that's helped me, just to throw it out, it's like the women leagues. They are very, we go just Google Women League in your area. They're very good at producing everything that's been said by the candidates at debates. They just pull whatever's public so you can at least see what the person is saying, whether it's at debates, whether it's at an interview, whatever they can find, they'll lay it out. So you can at least be aware of what these candidates are talking about. That's one small resource. But Emil, just if you will, on a granular level, like for example, your area, because y'all are wise enough to know exactly who's running for things. Like most people know, very few people are going to be on the level y'all are on. But I still wanted people to hear, like, how do you figure that out when you decide who you're going to back versus another person? What are you doing locally in your area specifically? If you don't mind.
Let me go back to when I was an absentee voter in the military, because I think this is where I probably got the most the best process in terms of getting to know my candidates. I would always read through, I wouldn't read every word, but I would read through the book that they sent me. And the reason why I read through that book is because when I was far away, I was overseas or in another state, I would have to kind of familiarize myself with what's going on. I'd ask my family who was at home in that neighborhood. I say, hey, what's going on? Are you okay? Is everything good? Who should I be looking at? And they would give me their information, and then I would be able to read with a little more context. But it was always read the stuff. I also did something that everybody can do, and that's go to the county website and read through the issues that are going on, based on the county summary. Now, the county is supposed to provide a nonpartisan summary of all the issues. So that gave me another way to engage the information. So now I can understand, okay, if there's a education bond, or there's a building bond, a construction bond, I understand what the pros and cons. And one of the things I always looked at when I looked at that stuff was, especially when I was a voter in Oregon, they would give you the projected cost of a specific measure or bill. Right. Wow. So you could understand how much money was going to be spent on your behalf over the life of that issue or that bond. So those are the kind of things that help me get really informed rather quickly. Again, I didn't read every word of everything, but I wanted to know, okay, is this person trying to reach me, the person? Or is he trying to talk to me about issues? Is he trying to talk to me about specific wedge issues, culture war issues? I want to know where they stand. So then if you do what I talked about earlier, just look around and look at the potholes and the streetlights and all that kind of stuff. The other part would be reading through that stuff. And now I have a very clear understanding of where I want to go. And it's more than, just making an informed decision. It's more than making an intelligent decision. What I'm trying to do as a voter is understand that there's compromise I'm going to feel as a voter. So what compromises am I willing to accept in order to get the things that I feel are important across the line? That's what I used to do. I used to say, am I willing to compromise? Okay, this person's not focused on the budget, but they are focused on food security or other things. Oh, this person is focused on the budget, but they don't care about these wedge issues or some culture war issue. I cared a lot about candidates, and I voted for Democrat and Republican and independent because I cared more about the individual candidate and or the specific measure than I did about the party. What I learned from all of my research over time was there's a consistent approach that I began to see in politics from both sides. And that consistent approach is what allowed me to understand the unspoken compromises I would have to make when I voted for a candidate. But it took me time to see those trends.
All right, I'm gonna leave y'all with this for everybody watching and getting. And this is for the somewhat informed voter, which I'll consider myself, not as astute as either one of these brothers. But a general thing that I've always kind of used as someone who's been an advocate for African Americans specifically to become more independents. Is and to not get caught up in the propaganda of what the left says and what the right says when it comes to us, in my opinion, because a lot of what we're listening to doesn't necessarily match up with the data or the facts. And I am a data hog, so I can't help that part of myself. But with that said, I've generally said, generally speaking, I'm not a big fan of incumbents, if I'm saying that correctly, especially long-time incumbents. So if I'm not too aware of an office, I probably will lean to the new because it's new ideas, it's new, fresh. It's somebody who thinks I want to make a change, and it ain't even about, again, whether there's an RD. If it's a long-time incumbent, if I have an opportunity, I'm typically going to lean. That's when I don't know. All right, when I don't know the candidates, that's something I'll lean towards. And then the other thing is this. People, believe it or not, the reason candidates come knock on your doors, literally, like all the things that you think, for all of the messaging, for all of the propaganda, Leo and Emil will tell you they make their candidates knock on doors because, believe it or not, and I've talked to people who specifically look at those numbers. Again, I'm a data hog, and they specifically do that work. It's the biggest thing a candidate can do to win a district, especially if they don't get the big money. The big money works when neither candidate knocks on doors.
Yep.
100%.
So, exactly.
For everybody watching, that you would not believe that the grassroots approach has now voters going in the booth and said, that guy came and talked to me. I might not even agree with what he said, but that grandma says he talked to me. He asked about my concerns. It actually still works, even in this social media age. Nothing outdoes the number of doors a politician knocks on, especially for one who concentrates and says, I don't have the money, so the only way I can win is to go knock on doors. So I just wanted to let people know that when it comes to politics, it's a lot of stuff that actually works versus the propaganda you're going to get thrown every week, every day when it comes to politics. That's my last comment. If y'all have anything else to say, I'll let y'all give it. Thank y'all for the extra innings. I'm out of here. We out of here. Yes, yeah, love it. Go vote. It matters.
Get that vote in today if you haven't already. It is that important. And there are a lot of races right now where one vote will make a difference.
Yeah, especially these elections. We've talked about it on past shows. These are the votes where you actually can make a difference. And if you ever strategically run for office and you have an opportunity to vote in one of these election votes where people are not voting, you literally can get people in office with fewer votes than it would take during the general election. That is a strategy that African Americans absolutely should be using. If you're tired of even your black representative that's selling you out, get them out of there. It can be done, especially during these times if they come up to vote during one of these off elections. All right, y'all, that's everything we got. Thank y'all for tuning in. Please share this show. Please subscribe to the show. Our numbers are going up, so appreciate y'all for continuing to watch, but make sure y'all are sharing this show. Unfortunately, we can't pop up at the same time every day, so I know I had some of the watchers saying, hey, could you? And I'm like, sorry, unfortunately, I got to get all the brothers together, and so we can't always get together at the same time. I'm going to Costa Rica, so this show is this early in the week is my fault, so I'll take the blame for that. So just make sure y'all are sharing it, because y'all can still watch it. Just don't catch it live. All right, y'all, we out of here.